welcome, Julian. And I'm really happy that you're taking the time to talk and just see what's going on.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's nice to do, and yeah, it's I've been things have changed quite significantly over the last year or so, 2 years. It feels like forever. It feels like 5 years now. It's nice. We seem to live in a virtual world now of Zoom meetings or other platforms. But no, it's great. It's yeah, nice to have the opportunity to speak to you and to speak to everyone else who is going to be viewing this, and hopefully that's thousands of people.
So first, we can kind of start. We can backtrack. I know we don't like to do this, but maybe 9 or 12 months, and just talk about what you would have been doing had COVID not been a factor, and what were some of the projects you were working on, maybe performances. Kind of give us a glimpse into that life.
I remember it was about just over a year ago now. I was at the NAM show, which is the largest, I think, manufacturer music show in existence. There are others that are equally as large, but it's a pretty big one. And I remember murmurs, people starting to talk about yeah, this bad thing that was happening, and we thought, oh well, it'll be fine. We'll get over it. Travel's looking a little bit challenging at the moment, but yeah, it'll be fine. And then it wasn't. And even then at TMEA, I remember TMEA, and yeah, at that point we weren't allowed to travel to certain countries, and things were starting to there was starting to be limitations, but no one could ever have imagined quite how bad it all would have been, and on so many different levels. And it seems a little, I'm not sure what the right word is, not right to really say, well, my industry and what I was doing has been so affected, because it's impacted people's lives in immeasurable ways that they could never ever have imagined. And all I can hope is that we can get back to some sort of normality. I think the normal will be different for quite a while, and the way we go about doing things, and how we are and how we interact with others will be different. But that's all I can hope. But in terms of the things I was working on, I was about to, when I came home, was about to be doing a new recording with a very good piano friend of mine who I've known from my days of studying at Indiana University back in the early 2000s. We met then, and we were gonna record an album in the springtime with a couple of concerts leading up to it. He's based in Berlin, so he was going to come over here. That was one of the first things to go. A multitude of concerts, some really, really exciting music festivals all throughout Europe, and it's kind of made me, I think, when you're doing it, I wouldn't say you take it for granted necessarily, but it just becomes your normal. Yeah, okay, I'm going to travel to this festival and play some concerts and make music, and that becomes your normal. And I think only when it's not there do you really step back and look at it and go, actually, you know what, I'm fairly lucky to have the opportunity to do all of these things, and to be able to travel and make music and see some really, really beautiful parts of the world. But it was then, that's when I think it got difficult for all of us musicians, because systematically it was almost, the phone would ring every day, and another concert postponed, cancelled, until your whole year looks incredibly bleak. And then it kind of set in that, okay, this is not going to get any better anytime soon. And then a realization that it's going to affect this year quite significantly too. We had to make I was supposed to be touring with my band, and then also with the Carducci String Quartet, who I've played with for a number of years. We had some quite significant US tours planned, which we were really looking forward to, and the amount of work that goes into that, even on the planning side, administration side, is huge. And we had to make the decision that it wasn't possible to do these. and it's tough. It's tough, but at the same time, I think there's two groups of people, and whilst it is incredibly hard when things are postponed and the things that we live for are not happening anymore, it's very difficult to find motivation, and it's very difficult to kind of brush yourself off and go, okay, I'm going to make something of this and do something different. That is hard. And I think it's interesting seeing what people did, because I think in the early days of COVID, people were cooking much more, or people were gardening or baking, and found a new love of various things. And some people kind of went, I wouldn't say away from music, but found other things they enjoyed doing and maybe took a little bit of a break. And then there are some other people that I think really, after a while, thought to themselves, okay, what can I do? There has to be a way of being able to still create the art and the music that we do and get it out there. So what can we do? I'd say I was in both. I was in both camps, and even now, of course, it's difficult to find the motivation every day when you're somewhat stuck within your own four walls at home. But if I choose to look on a positive side, it's allowed me to do some things that I just wouldn't have had the bandwidth or the time to do. And yeah, I try and choose to look at things in a more positive note more often than the negative side. But yeah, it's incredibly difficult, but we have to make the best of it and keep working hard for the times that things do go back to normal and we can get out there and perform again.
What did your practice routine look like? So from intense concert preparation and touring and everything, now you already are your own boss, but in the practice room now it takes on a different dimension. So kind of walk us through what
It
that looks like.
does. And I've been thinking about this recently, because so much of all of it we live, or I say we, who else? I can only speak for myself. I live for the performance. I live for that. You work and you create something, and then you present it to an audience, and that's I wouldn't say the reward necessarily, but that's what I live for. It's an adrenaline rush. It's and when you're then sometimes preparing or learning music without those things, it's kind of hard to then gauge where you're at in some ways, if that makes sense. So it is, yeah, it has been kind of tough, and I have completely forgotten what your question was now. Sorry. Oh, practice.
Just practice. Yeah.
Conveniently forgot. No, the practice is interesting because in some ways I feel like I am busier now than I was before, but in a different way. There's a lot more of the planning, the administration. Over the years, I think it's almost now 15 years that I've worked with Conn-Selmer, and so because a lot of my time with them would be traveling and doing masterclasses, clinics, because that can't happen. My role there has taken on a bit of a different. It looks a little different now than it did, but I really enjoy it and I thrive on that challenge. So, and the way everybody works has changed. So there's now a lot more meetings. There's a lot more planning. There's a lot more development that we can do because we can't get out there. So it has been difficult, and for the first time in my life, I've had to actually. It might sound ridiculous, but for the first time, really, I've had to write out a schedule. Okay, this is what I'm going to want to get done at this time, because otherwise, sometimes there's so many things that you want to put time and effort into, or you need to. It's very difficult to compartmentalize. In terms of what I was practicing, though, I've used this time to really, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I've used this time to go back to basics, really. So much of it would be preparing for a concert or learning new repertoire or working with composers, that now I thought, well, now's a good time to go back to these basics and really work on the fundamental stuff. And on that note as well, a lot of the jazz theory, I've been working on that. So you have to play music, though. For me anyway, I have to be playing music at home, but not only music. Of course, the technique is the largest part of it, and without that you don't actually have anything. I truly believe, so I have used that opportunity to try and get back to a lot of that stuff that I did when I was a lot younger, and because of time, because of various other constraints, it's I wouldn't say you don't get to spend as much time doing that as you maybe should or would like.
You've also been quite busy during the COVID months, and you have produced some really interesting and incredible things. The first of it being the your publishing venture of
Yeah,
Bliss music.
Bliss.
So
I realize I am kind of fortunate to have a last name like Bliss. It's kind of nice. It works for things like that. And some people have wondered, asked me if it's some sort of stage name, and it's not. It's I'm just. It was very lucky, I guess, and ended up in the arts with a name like that. But over the years, I've arranged quite a lot of music, and it's always been for myself. So I would make some sort of arrangement on Sibelius that I could understand and read, and I'd then scribble all over it and then go and do some concerts. Um, and it seems I was doing more and more. I think the biggest work up to fairly recently was Prokofiev Flute Sonata, which I recorded a number of years ago, which is, I mean, it's a crazy piece. It's ridiculous to play on the clarinet. You're jumping all over the place, but it's a lot of fun. And then more recently, Rachmaninoff Cello Sonata. It is the most gorgeous piece of music, and I'd always wanted to play it. And that was actually what I was supposed to be recording last year with my friend Julian from Berlin. But I thought, now I can spend some time and I can really create these arrangements and publish them. And through speaking with other people I know that have done similar or work with publishing companies, the idea of self-publishing came up. And so I thought, actually, it's very doable. It's very possible. It's just taking the time to understand Sibelius a little bit more. I work with a fantastic typesetter. The person, I say, it's the person that makes it all look pretty on the page, makes the page turns in the right place, puts all the dynamics in the right place. I get the notes on the page and what I want to play. But to me, the underlying thing for all of this, and I guess really the underlying thing for everything I do, is that you want to be able to advance clarinet playing, and however you want to say that, or however you want to do that. So part of it is by creating new repertoire. And to arrange music then gives people the chance to expand the repertoire and to be able to play new things, or arrangements of pieces that they maybe wouldn't have played before. So I think it's nice to be able to expand that and work on some new things. And it's something I had wanted to do for quite some time. And it's, I guess, if you can say a positive that has come out of something so unbelievably negative, it was that. And I'm working on new arrangements all the time. The list is endless. I wrote down a list of the things I want to arrange, and it's extensive. But it then goes into, I'm working on a scale exercise book that will be available pretty soon. And it in some ways that's about the things that I've learned, or the things that work for me. If I can share them and they work for somebody else, then that's the greatest thing, really. So it has been a lot of fun, and learning new skills, and having to design covers and looks and feel and create the website, the storefront to go with it, has been a challenge, but I really enjoy it.
yeah, it's absolutely incredible. Yeah, it looks fantastic. And from what I've seen, there are 4 arrangements, I believe, available so
Yeah,
far. So
at the moment there's 4. There's the Rachmaninoff Sonata, which is, I mean, that's a chunky piece. It's, I think, 35 to 37 minutes, depending how fast you play it. It's a big piece, and huge for the piano. I mean, yeah, you need a really good piano player. I mean, Rachmaninoff is one of my favorite composers anyway. And then there's a beautiful Rachmaninoff song. There's a Schubert song on there as well, and then an arrangement of a Gershwin song soon, which my very good friend, incredible vibraphone player Lewis Wright, who we've played together for a number of years, very kindly did that arrangement. and there will be some Brahms songs going on there very soon, which coincidentally is also on an upcoming album, which will be coming out soon as well. So it's yeah, I just try and add to it all the time.
You have a new album coming out, to understand.
We
So,
do. We
yeah.
do. The new album is coming out soon. February the 12th actually is when it's all launched, and there's two singles out already.
Wow.
It's one we recorded it last January, at the very beginning of the year, and we went straight into the studio after New Year and had 2 days. It's something I've always loved jazz. I've always really enjoyed it, but for many years never imagined myself playing it. And about, I guess now 10, 11, about that years ago, I started to think about the possibility of playing jazz. And it's interesting to see and for me to hear how it's evolved over time. I think with jazz and with anything, the best way of learning is by doing, and to be able to immerse yourself in that world, surround yourself with other great musicians and learn from them. That's certainly the way, or one of the ways that I think I learn best. I can't tell you how lucky I am though to have those guys in the band. They are incredible, and having toured with them for so many years now, every night I see them play, it's like my jaw is on the floor. I just think, wow, and it's like a bit of a challenge. Like, hang on, I want to be able to play like that, and it's then inspiring because you're working hard. You're working because that's what you want. You want to be able to play like that, and it's just a huge amount of fun. And with those tours, we would do 10 or 11 concerts across the US for that particular tour, and we spent every single moment of every day together, all seven of us, and we get along really well. There's never a dull moment, and there'll be times even on stage where it will descend into laughter and we cannot play because we're laughing so much, and it's really, really nice. I don't know, sometimes I think with classical music we have this, it has a bit of an image problem, that we feel, or some people feel, like you have to act in a certain way. You know, you can't laugh on stage when you're playing. I mean, why would you do that? Or it seems very, you have to dress in a certain way. But it's not like that, really. It really isn't. And anytime I do a recital, I want it to be a very relaxed atmosphere with the audience. And but I certainly noticed that with jazz, it's very free. And whilst you spend a lot of time in the preparation to know how it works, when you get on stage, there's so many things that just happen in the moment, and I love it. I thrive on it. And I think all of us as musicians, the more the audience get into it, the more you push yourself in any situation, jazz or classical. If you see the audience enthused by what you're doing, you then start taking even more risks. And then if you see them giving you more, it's just one of those things. And I love it. And those guys are incredible, and there wouldn't be a band without them. And yeah, it's just a lot of fun. It really, really is. And I can't wait till we can get out there and start doing concerts again. But this album, because we had a show for a while that was focused on the music and the life of Benny Goodman, and then the time came to create a secondary show, a secondary program, and the music of Gershwin was just, there wasn't really a choice. It was, of course, Gershwin is, and the thing I like about Gershwin is, at times, is it classical? Is it jazz? His orchestral works, which you could categorize as either. And I like that. He was just himself and created some incredible music. And when you actually start looking at the list of tunes and shows and pieces he wrote, it's awesome. And so this album is a good amount of the new Gershwin stuff, but we couldn't not include some of our favorites that we like playing as well. So we had 2 days in the studio. We recorded a whole bunch of stuff, and it was really fun to put it together. And I love the cover as well. It's a kind of, we had this illustration done of all of us, which it looks different, and I really like it. So it's thanks to incredible team at Signum Records, who I've worked with for a number of years. So I just hope that everyone else enjoys it. That's the ultimate, really. If people can enjoy it and can feel or sense the fun within it. That's what matters.
And they can find this, they can purchase it, and across many platforms, right?
It should be.
Yeah.
It is. It will be available everywhere on your streaming services, whichever is your favorite. And if you're one of those people that like hard copies of CDs, then yeah, you can find it most places. But yeah, it seems the streaming services. Well, that's a conversation for another day. How streaming has changed things, but it is available pretty much everywhere. Recording is a very different thing, and I think it can shock some people if they're the first time they go into the studio. It certainly shocked me. The first time I ever recorded an album, it took it out of me. I mean, I was still fairly young. This was in the early 2000s. Again, the first album I ever did was clarinet piano music with Julian, a friend I met at IU, and by the end of the second day, it was really tough, and we were trying to get something, and you kind of get into your own head, and you just have to take a break. And we stopped early, and we went, and I think we went and had fish and chips by the sea or something, just something completely different. But over the years, I mean, and I was very new and very young, and over the years, I've realized it's a very different thing. You imagine for some. For a recital album, you could do 3 days in the studio, and we're talking maybe 10 till 1, 2 till 5, or sometimes even longer for 3 days. And every single note you play, you want to be good enough that it could end up on the album. And so you're trying to output your 100% for hours and hours at a time. And it's tough. It can be tough. But over time you learn to focus on the things. For example, you don't need to be focusing on the sound that they're creating, or the sound that they're picking up. If you have excellent engineers and producers, once you put your trust in them, you can focus on the playing. And on the same side, I think the relationship between a producer and the musician is incredibly important, because you have to trust them. If you play something and you do 2 or 3 takes and they say to you, "We've got it, let's move on," you have to trust them that they've got it, because they're the ears on the other, they're the kind of third party ears that hear it as a whole thing rather than being involved. And it can take a while. It can take a while to find a producer that is on I don't like the phrase, but on the same wavelength as you, has your same expectations, has your same stylistic expectations in mind. But at the same time, it is an incredibly fun process, and then to hear afterwards what comes out of it is really enjoyable. The other album I recorded most recently, which is coming out in May, so this year is an album year. There's another one after that as well, but in May is Brahms Clarinet Sonatas, and Brahms 4 serious songs, which was the piece he wrote just after the sonatas. And I mean, Brahms sonatas are it's like Mozart clarinet concerto. It's an important thing. If you're going to record that, yeah, everybody knows that piece, and it's important. And it was a huge amount of fun. We ended up at this beautiful studio in the north of England, in the countryside, and we were kind of immersed in this. You're kind of getting away from everything almost, and you can walk and you can go outside, and it's completely silent, and you stay on site. And the way we were staying, my bedroom was, I think, 2 minutes from the studio, so you could wake up, a cup of coffee, and you're in the studio, and off you go. And it's a huge amount of fun. It really is. But you do have to it's a different mentality. It really is. And I do like doing live albums. I really do enjoy doing live recordings, because I like the risk, actually. My Mozart concerto album from many years ago, that was live. And I remember some people saying to me, "But it's Mozart, aren't you a bit worried?" No, it'll be fine. We have a patch session afterwards. We'll record the rehearsal, and yeah, I've played it enough that I think we'll get something that works. But I do love recording, and I'm looking forward to having the Brahms out there as well, especially so close to the jazz album in terms of time, to have these completely different sounds, and in some ways, and in other ways not, ways of playing the instrument. Yeah, it was interesting, but yeah, that I'm looking forward to that one being out. We're just finished designing the front cover for that, which is also the other fun part, the other creative side.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we can look out for that in May, you said.
That one is in May. And then while we're here, we might as well talk about the last one. Is something again that's completely different. And this was born through being stuck at home and through COVID. I got very itchy feet, and I was like, I need to do something. I need to be creating something. And I'd done an album before of Steve Reich, New York Counterpoint, which is multi-tracked. And I'd always wanted to do another multi-track album. And I don't really know where this idea came from, but I decided that I wanted to create multi-track clarinet versions of some of the greatest American band pieces. And so the three that were picked in the end were John Mackey's Asphalt Cocktail, Eric Whittaker's October, and Frank Kelly's Blue Shades. I mean, three works that if you were in band at school or knew someone, you're going to know those composers, if not have even played those pieces. And I thought, I want to do clarinet versions of these, and percussion, clarinet and percussion. So worked with a very good friend of mine called Joby Burgess, and set about arranging the parts for multiple clarinets. And some of them are quite big. I think the one of them has 35 clarinet parts. Another is about 25, and there's 7 or 8 percussion parts. One piece, I can't remember which one. I exported all the tracks. It was, I think, about 63 tracks in total. But I recorded it all here in this very room. Recorded it myself, edited it all myself, put it all together myself, and yeah, it was really fun. And then now it's gone off to be mixed and mastered, where they make it sound, hopefully make it sound good. And it's gonna be interesting, because I don't think people have really done clarinet versions of these pieces before. It's certainly not on that scale. So I'm really excited about that one. It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
Well, and I did things like find a contrabass clarinet. I've never really played contrabass much before. I mean, I've squawked around on it a little bit, but why not? I've got the time. So I found a contrabass in one of the old LeBlanc paper clips, and set about figuring out. Vandoren incredibly generously sent me a mouthpiece, ligature, reeds, the whole lot. And I think the first thing I did was play the lowest note I could, as loud as I could. It'd be rude not to. And so over the next couple of days, figured out the contrabass for what I needed to learn, and yeah, recorded my tracks at home. And it was really interesting though to layer up all the parts, and then to press play and hear everything together with all the percussion parts too, and think, I recorded that. I recorded that at home. Yeah, it's fun, and it's made me. I want to do another one now. I want to do some other pieces, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what people's reaction will be to those pieces. And again, I all I can hope is that people enjoy them and like them. So anytime I would do a recording, and I have an engineer, a guy called Mike Hatch, who I work with, and he's like a magician. The sound, it's like he knows exactly the sound I want, and it's sometimes you go into recordings and they're adjusting things for a while and moving microphones around to get the right sound. With him, you say we're recording Brahms Sonatas, he knows the kind of sound that those pieces require, and maybe there's 1 or 2 tweaks and you're good, off you go. And so I'd always been interested in the microphone side of things, and why someone would choose to record you with this microphone compared to that, and what the sound differences were. But I never had any real experience myself. And was that another friend of mine, vibraphone player who plays in the band, Lewis Wright, had some recording experience and had got himself a microphone, 2 microphones, and an interface to record into. So after speaking with him, that's when the journey started. I will warn anybody, it is a very slippery slope. Once you start looking into audio recording equipment, there is always more. There's always another microphone, and if I had this, I could do this, and if I had an extra 2 channels, I could record these. Yeah. But then it was the software I use is Logic, and there are a variety of different ones, and I find Logic works really well for what I use. And it was record into it, figure out how to record into it, and then if I needed to do any editing, work that out. But for all of these pieces, I had to create click tracks, which in itself, you have to figure out how to create a click track yourself. But to me, it's nothing that's too difficult. Yes, a challenge, but I always like this. It's all part of the creative side. And actually, talking about microphones, I just got another pair of microphones which I have on trial. But yeah, it's fun, and I would encourage people to look into it. And you don't have to go into it a lot of people think that to start recording yourself to a high level you need incredibly expensive equipment, and yes, some microphones can be very expensive, but there are some other brands that give you very, very good sound that's affordable. I think that the main thing for me though, at the beginning of COVID, I started to see an influx on social media of musicians putting out videos where the sound quality really was not very good. And I thought to myself, but majority of what we do as musicians is the way it sounds. And so it should sound, I understand there's limitations sometimes, but it should sound as good as it possibly could. So I decided I wasn't going to put anything out until I had the opportunity to try and get some decent sound. But yeah, it's a world that has kind of captured me now, and I love it. I think it's great. And like I say, I want to do another multi-track, maybe something slightly different, but still multiple clarinets. It's like dusting off the E flat clarinet and the C clarinet, and trying to squawking away. And the bad is as well, I get carried away, and I had to go around to my neighbours and say, look, I'm really sorry if you hear me playing E flat at 2:00 in the morning, please do come and knock on my door. And there'll be times I realise I'm recording parts for Asphalt Cocktails, screaming away on the E flat clarinet, and I look at the clock, and it is 2:00 in the morning. I've got to go to bed now. Yeah, I just get really into it, really excited, and I just like creating stuff.
Are there any microphones or brands maybe that stick out to you that would be good for kind of introductory level, and then maybe what you use now? Or
so it does depend slightly, and when you start listening to different microphones and different types of microphones, there's different sound characteristics they give. Some actively try to give you a very neutral representation of your sound. Some will inherently add a bit more color. Some will be darker. Some of them are so neutral that they can end up very clinical, to me anyway, and very too neutral almost, and you sometimes want a bit of color. The thing that I found that I really like are ribbon microphones, and they give a kind of darkness in sound that I think really works nicely for the clarinet. But saying that, for clarinet, you don't have to record it in stereo. A lot of times you can just record in mono. But when I was getting microphones, often if you buy a pair, they come as a matched pair. And so I thought, in the future, if I was to want to record myself some concerts, some recitals, I could take my laptop, my little interface, and my 2 microphones, and it gives a little bit more flexibility to me if you have a stereo setup. Now, instantly, if you start talking about the big companies, Neumann, Scherps, Royer, those sort of things, yes, they are, they're expensive. There's no 2 ways about it. It isn't, to me, it's somewhat of an investment, and if you look after microphones like this, they will last probably longer than you will be playing, I guess. They're still using historic mics that sound fantastic. But there are a couple of companies, and one I came across recently was a company called Line Audio, who are based out of Sweden, I believe, and they make some microphones that sound really good, and they are incredibly reasonably priced. I think we're talking somewhere in the region of, I think, about $300 for a pair for two of these microphones. And they do different patterns, different pickups, and I've heard them, and they do stack up very, very well against some much more expensive brands. The difficulty is they're a very small company. I think it's a one man in Sweden who makes them, and that's hence kind of the low price. Really, is he does it himself. So getting hold of them is a little bit more challenging than some of the large companies. But you can order direct, or you can sometimes find them used, although people do tend to hang on to them. But this is sort of where it becomes a matter of taste. And I would encourage people, a lot of these places will, if you have a music store nearby, or sometimes they will do things on trial, you can record yourself and listen and decide what you like. The setup I have now, I have two microphones by Roya, who are sort of in some ways, the market leaders when it comes to ribbon microphones. And the microphones I have on trial now are Scherps, a German company, Scherps MK4s, and those, yeah, they're really nice sounding mics, and the combination of the two, I think, gives you a lot of flexibility in sound. But yeah, you can spend obscene amounts of money if you want to, but you can do it somewhat on a budget too. Audio interface is a very important thing, and there's endless brands out there. The one I have at the moment is made by a company called Universal Audio, Apollo, and like I said, recording to Logic. But there are I know some people who, for home recording, record it into GarageBand, or some Pro Tools and those sorts of things. So the nice thing with Logic is they did I think it was a 90-day trial, so you could try it out. But yeah, and it's, like I said, once you get into that world, I'm fascinated by it, and some people may be completely bored by me talking about microphones or the different sound characteristics of different types of microphones. But I really like it, and yeah, it's I'm going to stay with my setup now for a while. And even little things like trying to treat the room I'm in, or acoustic panels behind me to try and control the acoustic a little bit. It depends what you're trying to do, though. If you are trying to create a commercial recording, which is what I've actively tried to do, then you have to have high quality sound, high fidelity. If you want to record stuff for yourself, then even there's some great microphones that you can plug into the bottom of your phone. There's multiple companies. I have one by Shure that goes into the iPhone, that does sound really good as well. So there are ways you can do it on a budget, but I would encourage everyone to record themselves. Not even if you don't want to put out the content, because hearing yourself from a kind of third person and from a distance, you hear things that you don't notice otherwise. I did it recently. I was trialing some mouthpieces, and I heard different things when I back-to-back them in recording compared to what I felt when I was playing it. So I think it's a valuable tool. And one thing I've noticed as well is when we're playing, I think a lot of us, sorry, I'm gone down a complete tangent now, but when we play, I think we feel like we're doing a lot of expression, a lot of dynamics, and then you listen back to yourself and it doesn't sound quite as exaggerated as you think it does. And so it is a really interesting tool to use in practice to record yourself and listen back. I would encourage everyone to do it much more.
This wouldn't be a clarinet conversation if we didn't have a little chat about your equipment. let's be real. So
Of course.
our mouthpiece, our reeds, our ligature, what we're using. But I do know that you have mentioned that you've been experimenting with our latest clarinet mouthpiece offering, the BD4, both in the traditional at 442 and then the BD4 13 series at 440, pitched at 440. So, well, let's talk about. So, what do you play on now? Like, what's your?
I have a mouthpiece that is fairly old, and it looks fairly old. I would say it's kind of almost on its last legs. Um, and it was made by Zinner, which was a company, German company, and I got in touch with them a number of years ago and asked them to create two mouthpieces based on some dimensions that I gave them. And a couple of weeks later, they arrived, and I had one that I played and I loved it, and unfortunately, that one I managed to break it, which was not a good day. But I had a backup, never quite as, I don't know, it never really was quite as good as the first one. It wasn't my, but that's all I had, and I mean, probably 98%, 99%. And of course, you get used to it over time. The way you play, you do get used to what you're playing. Anyway, so I have been looking for an alternate, a replacement for a while. And when the first Black Diamond series came out, the BD5, I really liked it. But then when the 4 came out, it was so unbelievably close to what I was playing already. I will say my setup is somewhat unconventional, in as much as I play a fairly open mouthpiece and a very hard reed. So with the BD4, I will be playing. I do play the traditional blue box, but strength 5s, and sometimes I want them even harder. I don't know. Can you make a 6, 5.5? I don't know. I don't know exactly why that is. It's just the way I play, and I've thought about even changing it. I've thought about changing mouthpiece to something completely different, trying to go down to a 4. Well, if it's not broken, then why fix it? If it works, then it works. And I've never really had an issue with playing hard reeds. Some people think that, you know, maybe if you play too hard reeds, you bite and you get pain here. I haven't experienced that. I don't really get fatigue here. It must just be the way I am and the way I play, and it works. So, not that it's too late to change. It's like, if it's not broken, then what's the point in changing it? Let's just carry on. But anyway, back to the point. No, the BD4. When I tried the first one, I thought this is incredibly close. So close, in fact, that I had a rare concert. Would you believe? Towards the second half in 2020, and I almost, and this was a couple of days before, I almost just played the concert on that mouthpiece, and then I thought, well, you know, maybe let's not change too many things. Let's stick with what you know, and then over time, but it plays really, really well. It allows me the flexibility and articulation. The sound is great. Got really good presence. Really nice kind of color sound, harmonics. I was really, really impressed. And then tried the 13 series, which for me, I've always been one player, I think, to play slightly on the sharper side of things. Maybe that is partly setup, but I did find the normal BD4 worked very nicely for my setup. But I can definitely see that the 13 series would also work very well for some people. And some people say there's a slight sound difference, and that could just, I think that's kind of perception. Maybe because, I wonder if because the pitch is slightly lower, it's then a color of sound that we're interpreting rather than an actual change in sound. But no, I've been incredibly impressed. I mean, the mouthpieces that I've tried from Vandoren over the years have always been incredibly high quality. And yeah, I've been playing the rose gold MO ligature for a while now, which I love that, and that's been a great one. And I think I got one of the first black optimum ligatures as well. That was for the bass clarinet. Yeah, so, and that's a pretty cool looking ligature. I was like, that looks sweet. Yeah. So, I like it. I've always been a huge admirer of what Vandoren do, and yeah, you guys are the absolute market leaders in my opinion, and yeah, the quality of products, and that's what I really like for teachers. They can recommend a BD4, BD5, M30, whatever 5RV, and they know exactly what it's going to be like. Yeah, every mouthpiece does have slight playability differences, but they're so minor. It's incredibly high quality and very consistent, and is why I'm incredibly proud to be an artist. And if I didn't believe in the products, then why would you? Is it's yeah, I love it, and yeah, the reeds are good too. They help. They play most of the right notes most of the time, so I think that's all you can. That's all I can ask for.
Does your does anything change when you switch from a jazz centric performance to classical? I'm sure you get that question a lot. Um,
I do actually. Um, I might go down to a strength four read. Oh, I know, but that's about it really. And there have been times when I don't change at all. To me, though, I see them as yeah, the genres are different, but I sometimes wonder if people think that when you play jazz, it's like a you don't have to make a nice sound. It's like an excuse, oh, you're jazz, so it's not so important to make a nice sound. No, you you should be focusing on sound. You should always be making a really beautiful sound, no matter what you're playing. And maybe that's kind of the classical part of me coming out there, but I always I always focus on that. So nothing else changes. Maybe a slightly softer read. To me, there's more similarities between the genres than there are differences. Yes, in jazz often you don't have pre-prescribed notes to play, so you're improvising that. But equally in classical, a lot of the time you're still improvising the phrasing, the intent, the character, the inflection on certain notes. If you're playing with an orchestra, Mozart clarinet concerto, let's take that, the first phrase, there's endless ways to phrase that. And if you go and play it with five different orchestras, you'll get five, of course, similar but slightly different interpretations. And to me, that's, as a musician, you should be flexible and you should be adaptable. That if you hear something in the violins, maybe they articulate or phrase something that you could do something similar, and that's improvisation. And so that's the same. That's the same thing to me. You're in the moment and you're creating something, and that's what keeps it enjoyable and that's what keeps it fun. Because if you played Mozart, Brahms, any of these pieces the same way every single time, the audience are going to notice it after a while. And that's something, again, I've digressed and gone down a tangent, but it's something I was told by a great English clarinetist, a guy called Anthony Pay, who plays a lot of historical classical clarinet. And I had a good few lessons with him. And there was one time he said to me, how about you play, I think it was top of the second page of Mozart, how about you play this bit piano? So like any good student, I took my pencil, I went to write it in. He said, no, don't write it in. Why? He said, because next time you might not want to play it like that. You might want to do it differently. And that really opened my eyes to options. And I think what we should do is always practice different options and different ways of playing. Because in the moment you might think, you know what, I'm going to start this phrase louder than I did before, or shape it this way or that way. Anyway, back to my point. Sorry, I'm good at doing this. I see the similarities between jazz and classical. There's more similarities than differences. And I think both can influence each other in a great way. If you do have a classical technique and foundation in classical music, I think that can help. But then also having the knowledge and the freedom of playing jazz can really influence your classical playing in a positive way. So I'd encourage anybody out there to improvise. Don't put it in a genre. Just take your instrument out one day and just make it up. Just play, see what comes out. I think this is a good thing to do. Yeah, and that's important as well. In the early days of me learning jazz, making transcriptions and learning and then writing your own solos, actually composing is a very important part. yeah, there's a lot of really excellent skills you can take from learning improvisation. I think.
What are you hoping to see as classical and jazz music and different forms of music has been kind of ripped from us for a short period of time, that live essence. Um, yeah, what are you kind of seeing for the future? Is
It's hard. Whilst in the past we could have fairly confidently say this is going to happen within the next couple of years. Now, in some ways, a lot of that's gone out the window. We can hope that things get back to some sort of normality, but who knows if they will? And I think certain things will change. Something so small, formats of concerts. Historically, it would be a concert of two halves, and now I think we're going to see a lot more shorter concerts that are maybe 45 minutes to an hour that maybe you'll do twice. And in some ways, you could argue, does that make it then more accessible for a lot of people rather than an evening? If they're after work, they're just going to go and hear 1 hour, or on a lunch break hear 45 minutes of music, rather than, okay, this is a big thing, this is a whole evening and there's an interval in the middle. And so it could reach a different audience. I guess the thing that does worry me is the education side. There's a huge amount of young people that either would have started in music or would be learning music now have missed out on the best part of a year, and arguably even longer than that, of the education that they need. And it worries me of, are we gonna keep these how do we keep these young people enthused and into music, and are we going to end up losing a whole, not generation, but a year of people from music? And that's kind of quite concerning. But there are a lot of people that are doing everything they possibly can to try and still inspire young people to be involved in music. And it's difficult, especially when all their education, at least in this country now, is from home. I know over there's certain areas things are starting to change, but I think that's the worry. And also, a lot of these places that would put on concerts, promoters, small music festivals, it's not, none of it is a huge enterprise. And without now a year, maybe even 2 years of having concerts, it makes things almost impossible for them. And I wonder how many of these small, fantastic but small concert series we're going to lose as a result. And it's a real shame. It's a real shame. Or also how many musicians have now retrained and gone into other areas because they simply had to, in order to maintain, to keep a roof over their head. And that's the really sad thing. That's the unknown part. And all I can do here is, I do try and look forward. I do try and be as positive as I can, because to me that's the only way you can move is forward. But it's not to say there's times when it's not difficult, because it is. It really is. Having, even like I say, being stuck at home for the longest time in my whole life, I think it's challenging, and it does get to you sometimes. But I think we're just going to have to roll with it. We're just going to have to roll with it and see what happens. And I admire what people are doing to try and create collaborations, whether that's virtually or new content or new ways of learning. There's a lot of people that are doing some really, really incredible things, and hats off to them. It takes a lot. But all I can say is I hope that we can continue to motivate and inspire young people when they can't go to a concert. I was talking to someone about it the other day. To me, if I do a concert, the only thing that I want out of that is, if there's young people, clarinetists in the audience, or maybe young people that are thinking, maybe I could do this, is if they hear a performance and they go, yeah, I want to do that. I want to be there. I want to do that. That's what I want. That's the best thing that can come out of it, is if you can in some way inspire someone else to as you would, chase their dreams. But yeah, chase their dreams, chase the things they want to do. because I think people, especially young people, they see musicians and they see them separated from reality almost. Like it's a facade. They don't see them as sometimes normal people. And sometimes in life we put these people on pedestals, celebrities. I mean, they're no different to anyone else, but often we put these people on a pedestal, like, whoa, you know. Yes, some of these people have created incredible things, but they're no more special than anybody else. And I think, sorry, I'm like on my soapbox now. But I think if we can continue to show young people that, of course, this is possible. If someone else can do it, then you can do it too, and you could arguably be more successful in whatever your definition of success is. So to me, it is worrying, it is unknown, but all we can do is keep moving forward and trying to make the best of it we possibly can, and hope that we can continue to inspire young people to be in music.